stay a while and listen.
What's going on, everyone? My name's Autobot Prelude, and my goal is to cover everything hardcore related for Diablo 2 Resurrected. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Blizzard Sorceress, how to distribute your points, as well as gear to look for early on, and areas to magic find once you get to that point. Now, do keep in mind, I'm attacking this video with the approach of a hardcore player. Things can and do vary between softcore and hardcore. Now, with all that being said, let's start off with the skills. So first off, we're going to start with the 1-point wonders. Static field is something I do not recommend. No, I'm totally kidding. I think static field is a great skill early on and even throughout the entire game. Some people can argue the value falls off later on, but regardless, I think it has enough value to spend 1 point in. Of course, you're going to do telekinesis and 1 point to teleport. If you're not teleporting, are you even playing a sorceress? Some people rock some of these frozen armors. I do not. Well, let me rephrase. If I use one of these frozen armors, it's going to be via weapon swap. If I find an orb or a weapon staff that provides one of these skills, I'll go ahead and use it because why not? At the end of the day, it's not going to prevent a one-shot kill. Now, of course, some people will argue that warmth is an efficient skill early on as well. And that could be argued that it is somewhat beneficial, but at the end of the day, by the time you start getting some of your gear that you're looking for, especially some of the early gear, it becomes valueless pretty quickly. I personally don't use a point into that. Now, as far as your cold skills go, maxing out Blizzard is going to be your main priority. Of course, all your synergies are going to be Ice Bolt, Ice Blast, and Glacial Spike. In the order that I max them out, typically, I'm going to go for Blizzard, Ice Blast, Glacial Spike. The order of these two do not matter, and I'll get into that in a second. And then from that point, you're going to start dumping points into Cold Mastery. Usually by the time you get 3 skills maxed out into the Cold Tree, you're sitting around in your 60s, and you want to start getting prepped for Hell. So pumping some points into Cold Mastery is going to give you piercing damage for cold resistant monsters. Your ideal goal here is 135%. Some may argue, 17 or 15 points is only needed, and others may say you need to max it out. That really just depends on your gear. As long as you have 135% cold piercing damage from your cold mastery, it doesn't matter how many hard points you have into the mastery, okay? But typically, you're probably going to end up around 15 to 20, closer to 20 at least early on. Now, as far as Glacial Spike and Ice Blast, some people have preferences here. I prefer Ice Blast as you get to spam it a lot quicker with the faster cast rate, and it's just a fun skill to use.
I like to have fun.
In general, it's very beneficial for single target, like bosses and stuff like that. Glacial Spike is slightly slower as far as casting goes. FCR does impact the cast rate of this skill as well, but it's just not as fast as Ice Blast can become. But the biggest thing with Glacial Spike is that you can actually control mobs a little bit better, and that just makes crowd control a little bit easier, and really helps you just survive a little bit better. So hardcore players may tend to lean towards the Glacial Spike, but really it's just a preference on which one you're going to use and which one you max first. But again, you're going to max Blizzard first, max 2 out of your 3 synergies, start putting points into Cold Mastery until you're 135%, and then from that point, you finish off with Ice Bolt. Those are your skills. That's it. That's all you need. Okay, so let's talk about attribute points. The general consensus is that for a sorceress, you're going to put the minimum amount of strength required to wear your gear, and then you're pumping everything else into vitality. And that's not the wrong answer. However, for a new player, or even a returning player that hasn't played in a very long time, I feel like they need a little bit more info there. So I'm going to dive in just a tad bit on that. So what I do while I'm leveling up is I get strength to around 40. That's going to allow you to wear a lot of the gear that you're going to find immediately off the rip. From that point, you're going to put all your points into vitality, and eventually once you start getting, I'd say mid-20s, go ahead and finish off strength and get it to around 60 to 65. Then from that point, again, all your points need to start going into vitality. But 65 to 75 strength is going to cover just about everything in the game that you're going to be able to find immediately. And you don't really need much more strength than that, especially once you start getting charms and other gear that's going to give you plus to attributes. You really don't need a whole lot more. But needless to say, the general consensus, again, is the base amount of strength. But I'd like to point out to stagger that. Don't go all the way into strength. Putting that few points into vitality early on will really save you a lot of time, especially if you're playing hardcore. It could be the difference between life or death, I promise you. So I'd like to quickly go over some gear that I look for, such as Ancient's Pledge, Rhyme, and Moser's Blessed Circle. These are all three great shields to use early on. Ancient's Pledge is probably going to be a little easier to find over Moser's. They're both really good for resistances, but Ancient's Pledge, you're going to get all three of those runes from Act 5, the second quest, the Barbarian quest, so it's a little bit more of a guarantee than the Moser's there. You got to rely a little bit more on RNG for the Moser's. As far as the Rhyme goes, it's all in all a really solid early game rune word that you can use. Same as Stealth goes. I would suggest probably striving for both of those in your early game leveling process. Once you get a little further on, V Magi and Smoke are two really good armors to look for as well, or strive for. Smoke could be arguably a little easier to find or obtain if you get the Lum Room, of course. The V Magi could be found as early as normal bales, so I like to mention both. Spirit Sword and Lore Helm are two really solid rune words as well to strive for. I would almost say that Spirit Sword is a necessity. The Lore Helm isn't necessarily as required, but it does have some great benefits there, such as damage reduction, energy, and one-to-all skills. Now, if we're talking absolute necessity, I would say that Insight is one rune word that you should have as soon as possible. As far as belts go, I try to look for either Night Smoke or a Gold Wrap. Both are really solid. The Night Smoke's going to offer some damage reduction, some mana, some all resist, but the Gold Wrap is even better when you're trying to magic find, just for that 30% MF. Now, Nagel Ring and Mantled Heel Ring are two really solid rings that you could easily find in even Act 1, so I would strive to find at least one or two Nagel Rings. Again, that magic find is super crucial for an early game magic find, or just in general, right? Moving into gloves, I try to find Frostburns or Chance Guards. They're really solid gloves. Both have their perks. Chance Guards is going to offer you some magic find, and Frostburns is going to offer you that increased mana by 40%, which is huge for teleporting. Now, I'd like to put this chart up for a second. These are all the recipes that you can craft for casters. Of course, if you can't find these items that I've recently listed based on RNG, you can always craft in the area that you're lacking. I would recommend trying to craft an amulet or even rings, as they are going to greatly help you out. Once you make it into Hell, you're going to want to start farming as soon as you can. A few areas that I like to magic find are going to be Hell Andy, Mausoleum, which is where you kill Blood Raven at, Ancient Tunnels in Act 2, Hell Mephisto, and Travincal. Eventually, once you get some better gear and you're feeling more comfortable, you can make your way into Chaos and Hell Diablo as well. And then possibly like Nilithok or even Bale, but that stuff can get a little sketchy, if I'm being honest with you, especially if you're talking hardcore. But nonetheless, these are areas that the Blizzard Sorceress can efficiently magic find, and you can get some really good gear very quickly. So hopefully this guide has helped you. If it has, drop a comment down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.